Good evening, chess friends. This is International Master Valeri Lilov, and welcome to today's lecture on YouTube. Well, I have to say Happy New Year because I think this is our first webinar for this year. Yes, some people asked me why didn't I have one last week. I think it was Grandmaster Simon Williams who had this brilliant lecture last week, so I do hope that you have checked it out. And today we're going to be talking about an isolated queen's pawn. Now, I do think that a lot of you wouldn't even know what I'm talking about because a lot of chess players wouldn't realize the importance of it. But now I'm going to tell you how common, how often this happens in your games, and how you can evaluate that, how you can really take this idea of isolated queenside pawn, and whether you're playing with it or against it, you can turn this into something incredibly successful. Before I begin, I would very much like you to tell me if you can actually hear me all right, if the sound is working, because sometimes there been a problem with the sound with the people that don't get to hear me so well. So could you please confirm on the chat, just give me a little message that the sound is working. Okay, I just got a message that the sound is working, so thank you. That's helpful. Thanks so much. Now, before we start, I do want to also say that this webinar comes with a fantastic 50% off offer of the so-called Leko method. The Vietnamese Grandmaster Lek Liam is one of the best grandmasters in history, and he's prepared a training course that is being offered by iChess, sharing some of his actual secrets on how to become a better player. He's my age group. We've played together since we were, playing in the European and World Youth Championships. So it's pretty interesting what he has to say, and it's an amazing discount. So you can check a link on that beneath the video, or you can see actually the link that I sent within the chat, so you can check it out. Now, let's begin first of all by telling you a little bit more about what an isolated queenside pawn is and how you can think of it. Now, first of all, it can happen out of any openings. For instance, it can happen out of the Caro-Kann. We have an example with the Panov attack going with e takes d c4, knight of 6, a knight of 3 pawn here, white moves, and then shortly after black exchanges, we got an isolated queen's pawn position. We can have the same thing happen out of many other openings. For example, there's the queen's gambit accepted, a very different opening. But then essentially after black takes the pawn, then white takes it back, and yet we have once again a very similar position. So the pawn on d4 is both a strength and a weakness in these positions, and when you get to understand why and what are the main subtleties that come with it, that will turn into a strength for you. Ultimately, the goals of each player are simple, and I'm going to lay it out right now so that you can know what this is all about when we're looking at the examples. First of all, the strength of such a pawn is that it controls a lot of space in the center, and it basically gives white, or the player who has it, sometimes it's black who's got such a pawn. For example, in the Tarrasch defense, it is black who creates such a pawn on his own. So c5, exchange, takes, knight c3 here, and potentially if in a short while white exchanges on the c5, we're going to have a position, a typical position with an isolated pawn for black, like the one on b5. So anyway, the whole idea is that when it comes to a pawn, like the one on d4, it gives some space and a kind of advantage for the player who has it. But of course, that comes with the problem that black will be trying to exploit. And the problem is he'll try to block the pawn and eventually tie white down on defense. Now, mistakenly, a lot of chess players believe this pawn is going to be taken. Now, that happens very rarely. It's extremely easy for this pawn to be protected, but that's the actual problem. Protecting that pawn is not your goal. What happens if you just choose to defend the pawn is that it will turn your pieces into pawns, and it will make them incredibly weak and passive. That's why Essentially, White's goal is to use that space, development, and time to manage his attack against the black position faster than black will be able to challenge and put pressure against the d4 pawn. So whoever basically succeeds first in tying the opponent down on defense is going to be successful. White and black both have equal chances, as long as they both know it very well. So I'm going to bring you a few examples. Now, I want to encourage every single one of you to bring up any questions you may have on the topic or anything similar to the topic, or any topic, as a matter of fact. I'm really encouraging any questions you may bring. Look beneath the video for links in the chat and everything, and do get involved within the class, because I'll answer every single question you bring to me during this lecture. So let me begin with a really instructive example I want to set up. So I think this was from the Leko method package, the training package that he set up. He set out some incredible games with an isolated pawn, and I want to tell you a little bit about these. So we're gonna start with the game. Just a moment. Okay. I need a second so that I can get to open it. Now that game was played between Vladimir Kramnik and Vishy Anand, and it's being presented beautifully by Grandmaster Liam. Nevertheless, I think it was a very impressive game, and I like to show it and share it with you. So bear with me for one more second. I need to get the names and everything in place. So there it is. Now, the game started with d4, d5, c4, d takes the c. It was played in year 2001, almost 16 years ago, between Vladimir Kramnik, who became a world champion just the year before, and Vishy Anand. Essentially, white played knight f3, pawn to e6, e3, knight f6, and bishop takes c4. As I said, this is one of the most common ways on how this line can, how this opening can turn into an isolated queen's pawn position. And of course, a6 is a little way to push the bishop back, so white moved it out of the way. Trade takes knight c6, knight c3, bishop b7, bishop g5. Now, so far, everybody's just developing his pieces in a very simple manner, so there's really nothing so special to talk about. As black castled short side, white played queen to d2, and black simply moved with knight a5. Now, I think this was the kind of first little mistake that black did. It's not to say that the move was very bad, but it didn't fit the development too well, and it kind of pushed white's bishop to a very good diagonal that will pile up on the king's side and eventually support white's attack there. Anyway, it's understandable that black wanted to have his knight ready to jump, and maybe bishop b7 right now. So the question that I have for you is, what do you think is white's best way to continue in this position? Take a moment and try to figure out white's most active move to make his pieces get better and bring them around to challenge black at this point. Now, rook d1 is a suggestion I got. There's nothing bad about that move, so I think that rook to the d1 works because it will support the pawn. But you know, the problem of rook to d1 is that black would do knight c4, attack the queen and the pawn on b2. So you want to generally avoid moves of your opponent that will tie you down, that will put you under pressure. So queen f4 was the move that Kramnik played. Exactly. Very good. Now the queen is ready. It can go to h4. It can help us to flexibly get more space and get more pieces, and Kramnik was very happy with it. From this point on, you'll see that white is starting this build-up that helps him to further progress things and launch this incredible attack against black. Okay, so black played rook to a7, And then, of course, now you're probably wondering why was that played? Why was threatening bishop takes f6 and then queen e4, attacking both on h7 and a8? So black felt like he needed to move the bishop and the rook, and he didn't develop the bishop, although I think it would have been slightly better if he moved the bishop. So anyway, he moved the rook a7, rook d1, and now the bishop came up. So now black wants to do knight d5. He'd like to exchange. He'd like to push us back. And it makes a lot of sense to do this type of move. I mean, it really does. It's a good-looking move. It feels right for black. He's ready to advance and create some sort of problems. So what do you think white is going to do? Now, while you're thinking about what white must do in this position, I'd like to answer a couple of your questions that you've asked. So one of you said, Valeri, my question is how to be a world champion. Well, I guess with a lot of training and hard work. Nah, I mean, even if you do that, that doesn't mean that you will be a world champion. You've got to be born with the talent for a world champion if you want to get there. But certainly you need the hard work. So, okay, one of you asked, please explain about the D4 break. Well, that sometimes could work, but you got to be careful because the square is being heavily controlled by black. So that's basically an idea. Now, knight e5 is an interesting move, but then black would likely play b4 and push us back. The moment we go back, I think black would do knight d5, and he's going to start pushing some of our pieces down, like f5 or f6. You see, let's think about this position. I want you to tell me, or not so much tell me to move or a move. I would like you to tell me, what do you think white must think or play at that point? It's a lot of active pieces that we've got. A lot of that is power, control. Things look great. But being able to do something in here is not that easy. So what should be white's best approach at this point? I have to admit, it's not very easy to figure out what to do, so think carefully. You know what? So much development and preparation and everything in place, it becomes almost instant and easy to figure out something effective must happen. But what to do, how to make things work. Now, queen h4, our bishop takes f6. Bishop takes f6 is a move you don't want to do. And the reason is because you don't want to be exchanging any pieces. If you just exchange pieces, what's going to happen is that your opponent will love that. He is going to love the idea of trading off pieces and just, making it easy and simple. No. When you are playing with an isolated queen's pawn, do never exchange pieces. Even if you think that it must be done or it's got to be done, trust me, you'd be better off without exchanging any pieces. It's a little idea, but I think it's quite important to realize, because if you don't do it, if you actually just do it like that, things could go bad. So rule number one is don't exchange pieces that quickly. Think of an attack. Now, one of you said a very interesting thing about this position, and what he said was the move d5. Now, queen h4 would have been met probably by g6 by black, with which he'd block us, so we wouldn't be able to do as much, I suppose. But the idea of playing d5 is very interesting. Can we really do such a move? I think that kind of move is quite interesting. I believe it's a very interesting candidate. Number one, it's because the move itself is perfect. It's attacking, it's opening. And yes, it does look like an actual sacrifice, but then you understand that all we need is to open up our pieces, and that helps white to take over complete initiative. So let's see. d5 was played by Kramnik. Now remember that this move doesn't always work. But if you have a good continuation, like follow-up, could work more than you can imagine. Like now, if the rook takes d, bishop takes d, then we got bishop takes h7, king takes h7, queen h4 check. The king is gonna go right back. We got to take an e7, and then the moment black takes, there's knight g5. All of white's pieces literally open up in a beautiful way by just like advancing and attacking him, and it's just there's really nothing he can do about that. It's all the attack and the dangerous tactics. So he's in a deep trouble without any possibility to to come back on solidify. It was a great move. So it just helps out in a big way. So like after the move d5, Anand realized that he was already in a difficult position. There's not a whole lot he can make. So what did black do? He played bishop takes to the d5 on his own. Okay. Knight takes to the d5. Of course, rook takes d5 fails. And I mean, knight takes d5 fails for the same reason. We got that rook takes d. And after pawn takes d, there's the check. And there's going to be queen h4 check, exchange in e7, and knight g5. So he's dead. He can't do that. And if he takes with the queen, we even have queen h4 attacking him both here and here. So it's the tactic is really very strong here. He had to take back with the pawn. And I think this is the critical position to look on, because a lot of the pressure is there. White's got the bishop pair, the challenge. He sacrificed a pawn that further helps him to gain more initiative and gather more activity. But then how do you follow up through this? How do you advance and make this position even bigger, even better? It is a big question, and one that needs more of an immediate response to. So what should be white's best way to go, so to speak? How to advance or attack or challenge in some way against black? Knight d4 aiming for the f5. Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea at all. But you see, the problem with knight d4 is that it doesn't create a threat. Now remember this. When you already launch the attack and all the activities, it is of an utmost importance that you try to create threats. If you do not create threats, whatever you're thinking about is likely not going to work. You need threats, and you need quick, immediate, fast threats against your opponent, or you'll just be losing it. So threats are incredibly necessary at this point. We've got to do them. Anyone? Rook e1, too slow. Too slow of a move. Don't mind it. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. See, what we've got to do right here is to think of a candidate that wouldn't just be a nice exchange or whatever, but will actually help us to make a problem, to make a threat of some kind. Let's see. Queen h4, absolutely. See, that was the move that we actually used before, and that's the move we're using right now. We don't need other kinds of moves. What we need is a move that helps us to just keep the opponent under pressure. And then what we realize at that moment is that there is this attack going against the f6. There is a threat going against h7. The black king is in a serious challenge and trouble. And he's got, well, truth is he's got lots of problems to worry about. It's not just, it's just a nice position. The most valuable thing is pressure is really there. It's created. It's beautiful. So what you need to understand is that on many occasions, you got to be thinking about forcing moves like checks, captures, direct threats, which will help you to consistently hold your opponent under pressure. When you have that kind of opportunity to hold your opponent under pressure, it's really going to work. And it is kind of amazing, actually. So White knew that. He was definitely up for the idea and for the attack out there. Everything felt right. So let's see. Queen h4. Black cannot do h6 now. It's clear why. The whole break out there on the king side is going to destroy him. There's rook d4, followed by rook to g4 and a checkmate. So you see how much activity White was able to get with that isolated pawn. So Black played h5. He was really hoping to survive here. And now comes a really interesting point in the game, because so far White was building up and setting up more pressure, but now comes a really important question. Okay, it's great to set up more pressure and do everything, but how to advance now? How do we, like, I don't know, trouble him or pressure him in some way or make something? It's a very, very interesting position and a situation. So, how to advance now? Okay, let's see. Rook fe1. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. G4 is probably okay too, but Black will just take it with the knight, and you would like to do an exchange, or maybe he wouldn't even need to do anything. It's not that much of a threat. Right now, what we have is this. It's a beautiful, incredibly powerful attack that's taking place. We got this fantastic pressure that's coming up against the opponent. And yeah, he's in trouble. Like, this is really the big deal about that. The most interesting part of the whole attack is keep the opponent under pressure, make him defend himself. And it was amazing, because right after the move of Rook fe1, there is really no way on how Black could defend. The pressure is there, the challenges are up, most of his pieces are badly placed, and so we're setting it in a perfect way. One of the principles, or so to speak, the main goals of such a situation always happens to be apply pressure. Because when you keep applying more pressure against your opponent, when you do that, okay, or when you get to do this, you could be incredibly successful. So you have to try and think about that idea. How do I get to apply more pressure and keep more challenges? Now, with that move in mind, obviously Black is in a deep trouble. And let's see what actually happened in the game. So after that type of move, there was obviously a lot of real issues that Black's got to be quite a bit worried about. He doesn't have much else. What did you do? He played knight c6. Okay, going back. So we're keeping him back. We're keeping him in the bad, in a difficult, in the horrendous position that he's got to be. But being in a horrendous position, now it's not a very nice thing. It's just about how do you get to apply more attention or more pressure over here. So what to do now? That's a good question. What to do right now? Rook takes d5, queen takes d5, queen b4, attacking the knight and bishop. What? Ah, no, come on. We cannot do queen b4. That square is controlled. No, think of something else. Pressure is great. There's no doubt about that. It's beautiful. So far, so good. Everything looks good. Well, it is good. I love how everything is played, but let's think. What's the right way to go now? Anyone? Knight e5. Don't exchange. Remember what I said earlier. See, if you trade, as well as with bishop takes to the f6, that kills off the attack and the power. We can't do that type of move right now. See, now, if we do g4, however, is very different, because nowadays, right now, with the move of g4 in case he exchanges, with h takes g, we can play bishop takes f6, coming up with queen h7 checkmating threat, and now it works. Bishop takes f6 wouldn't have worked. As I said before, traits were only going to help him to survive. Yeah, maybe he's not going to win, but who cares? He doesn't want to win. All he wants to do is to make sure that he's able to, like push back and neutralize our attacking power. So it wouldn't really matter that he's not gonna win. So remember to not exchange. Keep the pressure, but do it without trading. Rook e1 helped us to tie him down now on the e7. And as black has a problem, protecting everything, keeping everything together, g4 does work. So now Kramnik did it, and he was great with it. G4, queen d6. Black realizes if he takes with the pawn, there's the take and a checkmate on the h7. If he takes with the knight, there is likely going to be a take on h6. And, this is a disaster. More, maybe you can even take the g4. So the attack is working. g4, black played queen d6, white just took the pawn. Queen b4. And I think this is the last critical moment of the game to really figure out, after which the game was more or less finished, really. So I would want to ask you to find it because it has a very direct relation to how you should think and analyze in a position like that. And I think it's so important that we figure it out. So what black is really doing is he is actually doing his best in order to open and try to exchange some of our pieces. So how do we go and advance against the opponent at this point? This is a really important thing. He's trying to open up. He's doing certain things. So the question really is being, okay, how? How do we advance? Exchange, do something or not? It's tricky. It's a very, very tricky situation. Does anybody have a suggestion? H6? Absolutely. See, this is what we want. Now, how do we know if we should push the pawns on the king side? Well, generally, you don't. But what we find is that now white is creating some huge threats on the king side, and it's helping out a lot. One of you said, how does it kill off the attack? Knight wasn't contributing to anything. Well, you don't want to be trading, believe me. You don't. There's many reasons for that, but one of them is that every single piece, however unimportant it is going to somehow contribute to the attack. H6, perfect. We led him to exchange the queens, despite the common misbelief that without queens, there's no attack. In fact, that is a mistake. We don't care about the queens. As long as we can keep our activity going, as long as we can keep him on the backside defending. H takes G forced him to move the rook away. Otherwise, there would have been knight f5 check and all that disaster. Or, bishop takes c4. So black couldn't do it. He moved away his rook. And then white played bishop takes e7, knight takes d7, bishop takes e4. So in the end of the day, white's dominating, being a pawn up. And everything is more or less clear. Now, I don't think I need to show the rest of this game because it has no real relation to the lecture today and to the topic. I'm probably just going to show what happens in case of king takes g7 because maybe some of you are still wondering, Valeri, why didn't black just take there? And you're probably still confused as to how that would be a problem for black. Well, there are many reasons, and one of them is this move. And we see that e4 is hanging. If he takes, we got knight x d7 check. It's just that his king is always under the fire of every single attacking move we do. And that's just really a result of the d5 move. So if you look at the beginning of this game and you actually understand that everything you need to remember about isolated pawn when it comes down to using it is build the pieces, set them up, and find out the moment to break. Now, does d5 happen to be the only way to utilize a pass ball? Not at all. But it is, however, one of the more efficient ways. And if you find out a possibility to do it, to deliver it just like that, it can help you greatly. But let's take a look at the opposite side. I mean, let's talk about how to fight against a pawn like this. How do you just deal with this excruciating attacking power? It's trouble, a lot of trouble. Now, Grandmaster Leko in his training disc actually explains a lot about like how to fight against an isolated pawn too. So don't forget to check out this the amazing training package with some of the most instructive positional videos that I've seen right below this video, or click on the link from the chat. It's a really good training package. In the meantime, I have collected those instructive games, so if anybody wants me to send them to you, those games like this one, for example, of Kramnik, and the next ones that I'm going to show, do not forget to check to send me a message. You can do it directly to my email. I'll be glad to send you all the analysis that I have on the topic and anything else, or maybe just to visit my website and then send me a message through that. It's tigerlilov.com, and just I'll be more than happy to bring out. So now let's take a look at another very instructive example. So this next game was played between the Grandmasters Ivan Sokolov and Peter Leko. So it's a pretty good game to learn from. You want to flip the board. Okay, let's flip the board to get the black pieces in front of ours, and let's learn from this game. So Ivan Sokolov started the game with d4, knight f6, and c4 e6. Then we have the Nimzo Indian. As I said, the isolated type of position, isolated queen's pawn position, can appear for many openings. Queenside Nimzo Indian is very common to transpose into an isolated queen's position. So like c5, knight f3, d5, castles, black exchanges, then another time, and now we're set with an isolated queen's pawn. Now we saw what happened in the past game. It was a disaster. I mean, a total disaster. So really the question right now is, okay, this was really not that good. So how do we do whatever we are going to do in order to survive this position? Because it is painful indeed. So while you're thinking about that, I'd like to point out a few things. The first one that I'd like to say is be careful and think very precisely. Now, what White wants to do is he would love to just play bishop g5, build up his attack in the way he wants to do it. It's really easy for him. But what do we do right now? What's the best way to go? He's got a pretty good challenge, good pressure out there. And he's probably intending to play with knight e5 and some similar moves. Let's see if anybody could give an idea of what black's best move is. b6. Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's exactly what we need to do. Why? Because it's simple. You know, you don't really need that much of a great tactical line. All you want to do is to simply develop and prepare your pieces so that they can be well. With the bishop on the b7 now, black is going to set a very good blockade right there onto the d4. And we just love to do that. Let's go for it. It's a perfect move. It sets everything in motion, and we're ready. So, what happened after that move? Okay, well, after the move of pawn up to the b6, given the idea of bishop to b7, white played bishop g5, bishop b7, rook c1, and h6. Now, remember the main goal for black. As opposed to white's fantastic-looking attack and everything he's looking to do to achieve, what we want to do at this moment, at least, is what we want is to make sure that we neutralize each piece that we can, And as we get to neutralize it, as we get to fight each of those pieces, it is going to be very successful. It just takes a lot of time to do this. Step by step, it almost feels like black is ready to achieve it. He plays h6, driving away the white bishop. So for now, things are good. And okay, what happened after that? After h6, this was move 11. Yes. Hold on, I lost the notation. Sorry. Okay, bishop h4, knight c6. Sometimes you do it with very special moves like h6, pushing him away, but oftentimes the way to keep the opponent a little bit on the backside is with very natural moves like knight c6, tying him down so he doesn't get to jump. So white played bishop d3. And really, there comes my question to you guys. How do you think we've got to fight against white's pieces? Take a second to think about that. What is the most effective way to fight back those pieces that white's got? Because he's got some really good pieces out there, and we just want to figure out the right way to fight them, you know? So how do we do that? Well, bishop e7, absolutely. Thank you. That's great. You know, the bishop e7 move is the one that we just need, because the moment we go for that move, it's not only helping out to open our knight, but we're getting this brilliant possibility to play with the move of knight of the d5. In case of the exchange, we're just going to get the chance to play with the move of knight takes to the e7, and it's really easy. It's one of the best moves to do. The first thing that you want to do is simply stabilize. And then, once you're given the opportunity to do that, let's start. This is a great move. We're also set to play with the move of knight of the d5, which is a great candidate. And then we've got many moves. I mean, we can play knight d5. We can, in case of the exchange, he's likely going to recapture. This is going to be great. So now stepping up in that way is just terrific. It was great. Rule number one is you need to neutralize your opponent's pieces, not just to have them exchange or whatever. Well, what black is able to do at this point is very important. He literally gets to fight off any piece that is ready to come down. That's how we're not even going to give him the possibility to attack us. So rule number one is exchange the opponent's pieces immediately. And that was a great start. Now, with that move in mind, once it was already played, of course, black has much to worry about. So let's see. Now bishop e7. Okay. What did white do? He didn't like the position. He played bishop b1, rook c8, rook c1, rook e1, and knight h5. See, exchanges are the key. You cannot succeed with your ability to challenge the opponent unless you actually exchange any of those pieces down. Once we do that, and this bishop is forced to move and trade, we're going to very easily surround that d4 pawn and put extreme pressure against it. But first, you've got to make sure that the opponent cannot get activity. And he realized that. I mean, after the move of g6, white realized that after the trade takes, he'll slowly lose all his pressure. Black's knight is going to go to f5. The other one will maneuver either for f6 or f4. And with all that challenge and the pressure, white's attack and everything is gonna die. So he realized that, and he decided, you know what? Queen c2, g6. I've got to go with rook takes d6. Now that came as a shock at first when I saw that move. I was like, wow, this is like a really big move in this position. It's is this really happening? I mean, it sounds like a crazy candidate. But how to go about this position now? What to do? It's a really key thing. I think it's a very, very valuable question to think about, to ask yourself, and really figure out. So how do we go about this? Should we open? Should we not? What to do? And the way I'm looking at this situation, the first thing that comes to me is that White is really opening up big time, and he's actually incredibly strong and powerful. But I also believe that Black did nothing wrong. I mean, King G7 could be played. Yes, that's true. So that we could stabilize, solidify the position, no trouble. But in some way, I feel like there's a lot more that we could achieve than King to the G7 at first. Come on. We've gotta do something better than just to protect ourselves and stay passive, right? I mean, can be that, can be it. How to deal with the challenge that White has made. Knight b4, kick the queen away. Well, even that wouldn't help because White would do rook takes g6. You see, that's the reason why he sacrificed it, because he wanted to come down to the g6 with the rook and the queen. So what Black did was knight f4. A very simple and steady move, which helps out in a big way. After that move, we can think of the move of like knight b4. Then we have the challenge against the queen. We have the challenge against the bishop. But more importantly, now we have the challenge against the rook. The strongest piece will be pushed away. This is great. As a start, you never want to counterattack him. You don't want to even fight so much against his pieces. What you want to do as a start in such a position is figure out how you can neutralize the opponent. Now, what does neutralizing mean? Neutralizing means that you've got to figure out exactly how to push away any of the opponent's important, good pieces that are ready and that are important, that are most relevant to his play. So what we're doing in this moment is we're setting up a very good attack. So like what's happening in this position is great. Okay, so let's see. What did he do? After knight f4, but rook takes d7, knight takes the d7, and after that there was queen to the d2. See, White did not want to stop his attack. Not really. I mean, all he wanted to do was just to be fast and straightforward and attacking and everything. And it kind of made sense. I mean, that's what he would like to do. Let's just get the attack going and make it work. Why not? Let's attack quickly. It was a powerful idea that he started. Now, what happens after the queen to the d2? Okay, after the move queen to d2, Black needs to find another way to fight against the opponent's pieces like the bishop and the rest. What's the best way to do that? Anyone? How do we fight all these good pieces and attacking opportunities he's got? How does 94 neutralize White's pieces? How do we do that? It doesn't. It simply defends the g6 while it attacks the knight. See, any other move would have given him the chance to take on g6 and mess up the whole king side. But with knight f4, we're protecting that square. So now if he takes, you lose. And that's what we did. See, now White continues to go on, and this time he's actually trying to do it exactly the same way as he was trying to do it before in the previous move. But after queen d2, we've got to be more precise. We've got to be more careful. Anyone? g5. Totally. You know what's the difference between the previous game and this one? The isolated pawn in the previous game gave White this superior activity, and now it feels like he's got some, but it's not enough. Why? Because those pieces are more backward. You see, with the purpose of a few moves, Black managed to push back some of white's most important pieces, so that they no longer have that energy, that they no longer have that potential. And as the game progresses, after knight takes g6, f takes g6, you suddenly realize, hey, white is losing it. He really has many things to worry about, and there is hardly anything he can do to make it any better. It was, I think, really quite terrific. So after the move of f takes g, with the white bishop being pushed back, we understand how the game is going. It's step by step, driving away and making, pushing back, making the opponent's pieces go down. Bishop g3 was forced. So this was the time when white played the move of knight takes g2, queen c2, and queen f6. Just a very natural bit of a defense. Bishop e5 and queen f7. You see, white's follow-up is right now extremely missing. So this really illustrates the one idea. It's really not about 100 ideas. It's the one idea. When you fight the opponent's active pieces, he will lose quite a bit of his threats. And without threats, the isolated pawn turns out to be an actual weakness. So it's really that. White's fighting for initiative. Black is fighting to neutralize white's pieces. It's a fight of ideas. Now the counter-sacrifice helped Black big time to take over this combination, and in the end, he was winning. So what we learn from this example is that fighting against an isolated pawn requires a good, easy development, blockade on the d5 square so that white doesn't jump, and a way to fight his pieces by tying them down to the defense of the pawn indirectly. He couldn't take because of the bishop h7 now, but indirectly ties them down, and more directly offering exchanges, which little by little force him to either lose his control or go back and lose the pressure. I think this game was very interesting to show an effective way to deal with the white dangerous attack. And even though white was always looking scary, his attack, as opposed to the previous game, didn't have any preparation, was lacking the same amount of steam that it had before. So this was another very good example taken from Grandmaster Lekwang's Liam training package on positional play, and I'd like to recommend you once again to consider it. It's out there, 50% off, only for a few hours, and keep in mind he's a top Grandmaster with over 2,700 with an incredible positional style of play. Now, what I'd like to show you next is the actual idea of how the kingside attack works. And to show you this, I want to bring a game that to me is very special. It was played by Lekwang Liam himself versus Pantala Harikrishna, and that is a great game to say the least. Let me show you how Grandmaster Liam himself was able to win so effectively. Here it is. All right, hold on, copying it. The game is very long, so we're just going to see until that moment where Black's position basically collapses. So it started off with d4, d5, c4, c6. Now, I know that when I'm explaining about isolated queenside pawn, some people will be bored out of it. They'll say, okay, Valeri, this is like very simple stuff, and I don't know if I can really use this. I suppose somebody's already thinking about it. And I realize it. A lot of these positions are about practical chances. However, we also call them typical positions. This means if you know the right ideas or guidelines that you're supposed to follow, then it will be much easier for you to create and manage your own plan. And the different techniques that we're talking about, like exchanging the pieces, controlling the center, bringing pieces on the king side, blocking the pawn, things like that, they will make it much easier for you to set your own plan and decide how to do things right. So in this game, there was a Slav. Basically, Black was playing standard. He moved c5, exchange. Now, I want to say to you why white is doing edicts to the d. It's because if he doesn't get the stronghold in the center, there's no way in how he can fight for advantage. It's going to be very equal. So now white's got some very good ideas. He's looking for a way to keep the pressure in the center while he can build up his development. Move the bishop back. Here, bishop to the g5, bishop to c6, queen d3 to defend the knight. He's also opening up a little flight square for the bishop. So it's all much more of a build-up right now. And now we come with a very interesting question. So what is white supposed to do here? There's no easy way to break down the black king side. He's intending to play bishop e7 as we saw in the previous game, move that knight in exchange. And white is supposed to figure out how to advance now. Now, one of you said, in all of these main variations, is all of this main variations, or white's not supposed to play e3? Okay, now this is opening theory that you're talking about. No. The theory doesn't matter. In one way or another, an isolated pawn is going to appear. It's about how we're playing with it. So now I'm going to ask this question. White knows what black is intending to do. Black is intending to blockade the lines, do things right, and, I don't know, push us back, most likely. So how do we fight against that? It's a really very simple question. What is white supposed to do to challenge black and make sure he doesn't attack? See if anybody has a suggestion. D5. Well, I would love if it was a d5 move. But you see, d5 does not work as good right now. If you think about it, after d5, black will likely take it back with his b knight. So exchange, take is going to simply help him to solidify and get really well. No, doesn't seem to work. So I like the idea, but unfortunately, that just doesn't bring in anything. Nope. Anything else? Knight e5. Yeah. Knight e5 sounds like a really nice idea. Why didn't white play it? Because black would have exchanged. And you see, this wouldn't have brought any advantage on him, but it wouldn't have actually given us anything either. After the trade and knight to the d5, as I mentioned earlier, every exchange is good for black. He wants it so that he can push back our attack. So white made a waiting move. And I want to clarify this. You don't want to make waiting moves that mean nothing. You want to make waiting moves that give you extra control, more solidity, more firepower. When we do the move of bishop to the b3 as white played it at this point, you get to realize what is white preparing to do. It's not just about the move anymore, but it is more about the challenge. We're setting up the position for the idea of d5. We're getting ready to prepare our pieces. And this by itself is just terrific. Step by step, white is going to get everything he needs. Bishop goes back to e7. Black's preparing the exchange. White moves up. Now you see, if black tries to do a move like knight after the d5, he's not going to succeed that much. White will attack here, and he can exchange this way. He can play a4 and bishop a4. See, it's not going to be that simple for black to maintain and get the control. So white is going to fight black's pieces with a stronger and faster activity. Black realized that, and you put the other knight on the d5. So white develops. Everything white has going for him in this opening is the better piece activity. So he has to keep on that. But then black was smart. He didn't hurry. So not rushing helped him to make the move of a5 to acquire the b4 square. So how is white supposed to further embrace his attack and create more difficulties or challenges versus black's position? Does anybody have a suggestion on that? How should white continue his play versus the black king side? Knight e4. Not a great move. He would just exchange if we do that kind of move. I mean, you can imagine it. Knight e4, he'll just exchange. He's going to feel quite good about this. I don't think that it will necessarily lose, but believe me, no trades. This is not going to end up well. If you do the trades, he'd love that. He will like the idea, in a much better way. So why doesn't black play knight h5? He could do this, but then, as I said before, he would fail, because if he plays with the move of knight h5, we can just do bishop h6 or so. Although I have to say, maybe that would have been a little better idea. If we can exchange, maybe we can trade away the bishop pair, knight takes d5. No, black didn't want that. I guess it would have been probably slightly better, but don't know. h4, f4, exactly. Pawn inclusion is essential. Oftentimes, you can't just break him down with pieces alone. So it takes time to rearrange our pawns. White now gets to balance and move up with the pawns, as he's intending to plan ahead with a move of pawn up to the h5 at any point. And now black makes the worst possible thing. He retreats his pieces, which is awful, because when he retreats the pieces, things go horribly wrong. Bishop takes f6. Now you realize that after knight takes f6, there is the move of knight g5. And after that move, it's like there is this huge attack out there. There's like the possibility to advance. In fact, after rook f7, for example, knight at g5, rook f7, there is knight g, or knight e takes f7, rook takes f7. Bishop takes to the e6, and it's a disaster. So this is very, very important. After that, black will be in a big trouble. He actually had to take back with the bishop, but then after the exchange, recapture, knight d6, black more or less lost it all. It's like he lost the exchange, and then after bishop takes a4, knight takes to the e8, takes, and b3, black was an exchange down. So things went extremely fast here. But let's get back for a second. How did a move like h4 provoke all this? Was this the reason why black got in trouble? And if you actually think of it, there wasn't much that black could do. White took the very best places for each piece in preparation for any single exchange black can try. Even if black did a move of knight x to the c3, white was prepared to do b x to the c3. In case of a move like knight d5, white was prepared to do bishop h6. If the black rook retreats, white's prepared to do a move of c4. So you see, every single move either creates a problem to black or restricts him in some way, which adds to the value on how good an isolated pawn could be. But here's the problem. A lot of these moves require precision. So if you're going to play with an isolated pawn, you need to know for sure how to make the most out of your pieces. And it's a good exercise. It's a challenging thing, but it's a good exercise. Now, for the opponent, it's much easier. All he has to do is to figure out how to exchange or push you back, so that in the end, you're left with no attacking chances and the isolated pawn to defend. So he'll tie your pieces on it. But if you, as with the isolated pawn, could manage to apply the activity of your pieces as good, and the pawns included, as Leko did in this game, you can be extremely successful. How is h4 different than f4? That's a very good question. Thank you. The difference between those two moves is that if white played with f4 and black went, for example, with knight b4, queen e2, and likely knight after the d5, instead of having an advantage of that pawn, this f4 would have closed all our pieces. So after bishop h6, rook e8, you see that f4 can never advance to f5. The reason why that h4 would have been played and done so well is because white is going for the idea to push it up. And then the reason why the pawn moves are so important is because they can exchange and open up lines that will help us to hit him hard on the king side. So in any case, white's activity brought him all those chances he could use against black's position. I hope that you find these like suggestions useful. And yes, one more of your questions that was why not early bishop h6? Because it wouldn't have done anything. You see, White wanted to keep the tension on the knight on f6 and for a while, at least until that knight defender moves. So then the bishop is going to go up. These positions are not easy to handle. They're actually challenging for each side. But you see, following those guidelines is going to make it much easier. And I recommend you to take a look at Grandmaster Leko Liam's DVD. In fact, it's a training package. It's a digital copy, which offers incredible amount of typical positions like this one and a lot of guidelines on how to think about them. It's being offered for 50% discount for the next few hours. If you check it out, I'm sure you won't get disappointed. I found a lot of value in his ideas. And again, positional chess is the foundation of being successful in tactics. Because the tactic here took, what, like 1 or 2 moves to happen? But all of that took 20 moves to prepare. So you see, you cannot make the tactical breakthrough without having the actual preparation and the setup from earlier on. Thank you all for joining me tonight. And if you want to ask me anything about those concepts I was telling today, or just bring up your suggestions or questions for future topics, do not forget to visit my website, which is tigerlilov.com, or you can write me an email and directly at valeri.lilov@gmail.com. I put in those links on the chat. You can check the link for Grandmaster Leko Liam's training package beneath the video. So thank you all for tonight. I wish you a happy new 2017, and I'll talk to you next Saturday at the very same time.